Conrad, how are you?
Things are well, Michael. Thanks for taking time out of your day to open up a conversation.
I have been really looking forward to this. Like I've come to learn on after doing the podcast for a handful of years that there's a few names that when somebody says, "Hey, would you be interested?" I go, "Oh yeah." Like, and you are one of them. Early in my career, I was incredibly attracted to this subfield of adventure and action and action sports in consequential environments because I don't know, it's people like you that inspired me to do this work in the first place. People are pushing limits and exploring the reaches of the human experience. And, literally people are on the path of mastering both their craft and themselves. So I'm excited to learn more about your story. I've read about it and watched you from a distance, but there's a contour that takes place when people choose words and the way that they choose words that reveals so much. And so I'm as equally as excited about like the insights you have and the contour, the way that you shape um, your experience. And so, with all that being said, can we just start back in your early days just to get some context, call it a quick flyover, so there's some grounding of how you're able to be such an influence in the action world, in the adventure based world?
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you, Michael, for the introduction. You probably got a cue card from my siblings or my mother to be like, oh, yeah, everything's there and it's great. But yes, starting at the 40,000 foot view, I was born in San Francisco in 1962. My father's side of the family's from Northern California on the northern road into Yosemite, Highway 120, and the um, the Anker side is Dutch shipwrights from up by Ukiah, and then the Corcoran side was Scotch Irish, and they were provisioners to the gold miners in the gold rush. My mother's from a small village outside of Dresden. My father met her after the Second World War. He was stationed there and then brought her to the United States and uh, California, where I was born. And so that was, I think she was happy to having been born into the ravages of war, being born in 33 and seeing firsthand what that was. It was a pretty, a strong influence on my life, and sort of like you have to make the most of it. And you don't know how lucky you are that a similar narrative that many first generation immigrants instill upon or instill with their children. So that was kind of that view.
Hmm.
And then California, then to the University of Utah, undergraduate degree there. But I guess the main thing I was studying was getting outdoors and climbing, things like that. So that was where I began my business, working in the outdoor uh, space. So working in gear shops and on raft trips and taking people climbing.
Okay, so early messages were some of that first immigration, first generation immigration, which is there's a fortune to be here, to be, and so take it was it take life seriously or have fun with life, or like what was the subtext to the gratitude that she was sharing to you?
Part of it was, yeah, Greg, to take life seriously, to like, yeah, I was born in 62, 67. We landed on the moon and we couldn't, collectively as a society, nation, the world, we're doing great things. And so my mother was like, yeah, when I was your age, it was quite a bit different. So you have that level of, and she's passed away, but she was a white woman who had um, a strong accent. So I could see people judging her on her accent or with just that. So a bit of empathy for people um, that don't look like us. And I'm not equating my mother's what she went through as an immigrant with a German accent to what other members of our community have endured over generations. But it gave me a bit of empathy and insight into people that might not um, fit in the norm. And so that was another lesson from her.
Okay, so you go to empathy about people like her rather than anger for the people that were judgmental, critical, or created even momentarily a sense of hostility in your family.
Yeah, there were,
Hmm.
yeah, and it was, the Second World War was only 20 years old. And so it was still very relevant. And children play war things. And, we were in that weird space where Japan and Germany went from being the enemies in the war to then being allies in the post world, and then it was the Cold War, and so trying to grapple with all of that, and then with my mother being who she was and being in the place, and so it was, and then her own reaction to war, which, as the timestamp, here we are, 15th of March, and our planet again is in the throes of war, and it's most unfortunate. And so anyhow, I got a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, no, contextually incredibly relevant. It's especially for probably where you are in your life as well. A full circle experience, in that context. And then if we go back to the early messaging, so it was take life seriously. Are you a serious person?
I love to have fun and seek joy in life, but life is serious. So to have things organized and prepared, to me, is a source of satisfaction. So this afternoon, I'll get out climbing. I'll be going out with our son, Max. His life is in my hands as my life is in his hands. So we have to take care of each other. And that foundation for climbing and outdoor adventure sports is a great way for humans to communicate. But within that, you have to know the systems. The rope has to function. You have to place gear. It's easy to make mistakes, to be careless, and then they catch up to you. And then people other than yourself are paying the cost with that. But yes, I take life seriously on a collective global sense. So I'm up at night thinking, what's the world going to be like in 200 years? What does our generation know? What can our generation do for future generations? And this understanding of humans and the cosmos, and at this point of knowledge that humans have, to me, there is a degree of seriousness and responsibility, particularly as citizens of the United States, where we have this tremendous economic engine, a very accredited and proven university system, a flywheel for innovation, a beacon for democracy, and a lot of these things that you and I grew up with, sort of as Boy Scouts. We were meant to feel proud about these things, but are we still there, and what can we do with it? So there's yes, the big picture, I take life seriously, and you want to make sure that you're healthy and you're not bouncing checks, kind of like that, keeping things going on that. But then at the same time, you always want to relax a little, enjoy that Saturday afternoon, and just watch a puppy play in a puddle for the first time, so to say, and celebrate the joy and happiness in life.
So there's in the surf community, we talk about like the parallels between surfing and life. No wave is ever repeated. Neither is any moment in life. And so being able to figure out how to ride a wave or be connected to the wave in just the right place and the right time, so too is it important in life. And there's lots of philosophical parallels, not to talk about surfing at all here. There's philosophical parallels between surfing and life. And are there some for guiding and climbing as well as, that would parallel in life? And it's a sneaky way of saying, like, what makes a great climber? Does that make a great human?
Yeah, they're say if you and I set out to climb a mountain, our collective goal is to make it to the top. We realize we can't do it as an individual, or we choose to do it as a team, to have a shared experience, to move some of the work, spread it out between people. But your common goal is what unites you on that. And the manner in which we communicate in that way, to me, is fundamentally healthy. And it's a paradigm shift from competitive, antagonistic, rules-based sports. And so, yeah, we set out the physical boundaries, and we put a clock to it, and then we put rules to it, and then we throw a ball back and forth, either with a tool or without a tool, and someone's the victor, someone's the loser. And that, for me, I was like, oh, okay, the team sports, it didn't work because I was a little bit of an odd duck. And then the boys that were like, like at the lockers lineup where then they were like, oh, it's football practice. We're really going to plow into him. And so I was like, oh, I was happily made the switch to scouting, and I had a great mentor, scout dad, that scoutmaster that was a Korean War vet. He was convinced that all young boys this day and age were getting a little soft in the middle, and it was his job to toughen us up and take us camping and doing things like that. And so a lot of those, my early scouting book is still here in my library, and things have changed, but still the foundation of it, of the buddy system and helping people they teach good things in that sense. So, but to the question, what makes a good climber, is probably someone that cares about their fellow partner as much as they care about themselves. So, someone that's really dedicated to you as a partner and giving that extra 5%. If they reciprocate, you'll have that extra 5%, and they'll see things that you won't see coming. They'll take care of you. They'll be able to say, Michael, you're exhausted. Have a sip of water. Let's take 20 minutes and rest at this point and evaluate where we want to go and what our next decisions are. And a partner helps you out with that. And that, when we have climbing as a vehicle for that method of communication, it's a good trajectory.
Is there a story that you're just referencing in your own mind about you being there for somebody in a time of need, or somebody being there for you in a time of need, that you could kind of bring me into it?
Oh, there's all these great stories. Jimmy Chin, our mutual friend, we were 2001, July of 2001. So 2 decades ago, we were on a trip to K7, and it was like two things. One, I was up climbing, and as I was finishing up the pitch, a small piece of ice dislodged, and it cut my just there somewhere on my face. And so of course it was like blood everywhere. Like some sort of, but I was just like fixing the belay, and Jimmy comes up and he's like, oh my God, I heard you like say the ice hit you or something like that. There was some exclamation of awareness while I was leading the pitch, and he got up there, and it's like 20 minutes later it dried up, and I was like, oh, it wasn't that bad. So we had that feedback with it. And then on the same trip, we got trapped by bad weather, and so we were already rationing food, and we were like bored. And so I was like, well, let's fast for the day. Like, and we're already eating a couple tablespoons of oatmeal, and the first of many starvation journeys that I've embarked on with Jimmy. And so he was like, no, that's not a good idea. We can parse a little more food out of our system, but we don't need to fast. We're already basically living on a very calorie restricted diet. So we was able to call over to me and say, no, it's kind of a cool idea, but it doesn't make any sense.
and does Jimmy, like in that moment, I can see him with like a grin, like, was it a whisper, or was it a demonstrative, like, that's a bad idea? Or was it more like, hey,
I think it was probably, it was at that point we're 2-3 years as friends, or maybe I'd met him in 98, something like that. So there wasn't that capability where you finish the other person's sentences off and you know what they're thinking. And it was like, oh yeah, of course you want to try the harder way, because he was like, that's what you always try to do, but this time it doesn't make any sense.
So I reached out to him in preparation for our conversation, and he said that what he's fascinated by is how you've mentored so many and mentored him. And so can we pause here? And so you're talking about relationships, you're talking about really understanding the other person, having their needs be as important as your needs. And then obviously underneath, we'll get to some of this stuff, but the skills and the preparation to build those skills so that you can truly be there for the other person. Because if you don't have the right chops and skills and you're a mess, you can't be there for another person. They have to take care of you. And so I want to pause that and come back to it. But can we spend a little time to talk about mentorship and maybe start with, did you have an influential mentor that shaped the importance of mentorship in your life?
Yeah, a great way of looking at it, and a good segue into one of the most important things of being a human and progressing through life, and being a mentee and then being a mentor, and still being able to be a mentee even as we are later in our life. And yeah, fortunately, as a youngster, there was my father and his buddies that took us out climbing, and they were mentors in that sense of like, oh, this is the ropes, and you have to literally learn how to climb because the systems are they're complex, and so you can't, it's not like running where there's either you have a very innate stride and you can improve on it, but when you go into it, having to set up an equalized belay, learning how to manage the rope, different techniques, they require some knowledge that people pass on to you. And so I guess in that sense, and then my sisters, they were older than I am, but they kind of mentored me in what cool was at the end of the 60s and 70s. So always the sibling mentorship is there. We always learn from them, and being a third kid belonged, so that it was like, oh, okay, that learned from them. And then climbing wise, in the Salt Lake, I mentioned I went to University of Utah. A fellow mug stump who was 14 years my senior took me under his wing in the mid to late 80s. He perished in 1992 in a crevasse fall, but it was the vote of confidence to pursue a life as a professional climber. And so he had played football at Penn State, and then semi-pro with the Neptune Mariners. I think that was like the farm team for the Dallas Cowboys. Went to Dallas Cowboys training camp, walked in there, was like, okay, this isn't it, within 2 days. And then drove west and was there at Snowbird a year or two after it had opened, and kind of lived on the mountain, and kind of that classic pursuing your goals at the expense of other things. So there was a chance with that. But overarching with mentorship is that it doesn't necessarily need to be every Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock with, say, the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program that we have here in Gallatin Valley, where you're helping out a child that could use some assistance and guidance and a role model with it. But it can be a single moment. It can be an inflection point where you validate someone in what they want to do. Like, yeah, you're a great artist. You should pursue this. There's, as long as you have food and you're well fed, I mean, you're covering the life goals or necessity to live and survive, then you should pursue art rather than something else, and kind of in that sense. So that those touch points can be a single inflection point for mentorship. It doesn't need to be an ongoing one.
Okay, I want to take a quick break here to talk about ice barrel. Recovery is one of the most overlooked and essential staples of consistently performing at a high level. Oddly enough, cold water therapies can play an important role in recovery. I've used them in my training for my ultra event, and I also use it on a regular basis about 3 times a week, even when I'm not under a high training load. It's just really good, and I respond really well to it. That's why I want to introduce to you Ice Barrel. Ice Barrel is a cold therapy training tool that offers an easy way to bring ice baths to your routine. They have a clean design and a compact footprint that's designed for you to experience the benefits of cold therapy from the convenience of your home. All you need to do to get started is fill it with water and ice. I've been loving it. Some of the things that I noticed after using it are, right afterwards, there's this unique activation in my nervous system. So there's this on that feels awesome. And then there's a glow that takes place for some time after that. So anyways, I want to encourage you to check it out. Ice Barrel was named Men's Health Best Cold Therapy Tool for 2021. And they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied for any reason. They're also hooking us up. So go to icebarrel.com/finding mastery to get $125 off your order when you use the code finding mastery at checkout. So that's $125 off plus free shipping with the code finding mastery. So punch over to icebarrel, ICEBARREL, icebarrel.com/finding mastery. And Finding Mastery is brought to you by Brava. If you find cooking challenging, like I do, even starting with the decision-making process of what to cook, I think I've got an awesome solution for you. Brava is the world's most advanced, powerful, smart oven that harnesses the power of light to cook faster than any other technology. So Brava is one of the best additions I've ever made to my kitchen. Not only does the oven cook things much quicker, but there's minimal cleanup. It cooks up to 3 different types of food at one time. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. And then another awesome feature that I love is they are consistently sending over recipes right to the oven. So they definitely support variety, which is something that I enjoy. In the Brava oven, I've made salmon and veggies and turkey burgers, veggie burgers, frittatas that are legit. And the coolest thing about Brava is that I do all the prep work. So I put it together and then I just slide it into the oven, and then Brava does all the cooking. And I know that's what ovens are supposed to do, but this is different because you don't need to stir or check. Brava Smart Tech takes care of that. It is amazing. It's like having an extra set of arms in the kitchen. And I know I mentioned it, but cleanup is like a snap. So go check out brava.com and make sure to enter the code Finding Mastery at checkout for $200 off. So you spell that BRAVA, brava.com, and use the code Finding Mastery for $200 off. With that, let's get right back into our conversation. Obviously, you have 10 out of 10 on technical skills. And oftentimes people refer to others as coaches. And that seems to me to fall way short to the concept of mentorship. Would you agree that mentorship has a different tone than coaching?
Absolutely. Coaching, it might be, say you're at the climbing gym and we'll try holding onto that handhold from a different rotation and it'll change your body position. You might then succeed on that same way a coach would in football or baseball, tennis, work to be on that along those same things. But in a sense, like with Alex Honnold, he's a better climber than I'll ever be. And for most people on this planet, there's nothing I can't mentor him in the sense of climbing. There doesn't make any sense with that. But being 30 years his senior, having been in where we are in life, there are life lessons that he can be receptive to learning about and understanding. And I'm keeping that open view as I age. I'm 59 today. So what are these next 20 years going to look like? And how can I still learn from others? And who is there that I can learn from? And then how can I take that knowledge I'm learning from and share it with as many people as possible?
Do you have, I've got my mentor, Gary de Blasio, it's clear. He's known me since I was 16. He saw me and then has seen me at every phase of my life, partly because I wanted to be seen and be seen by him, and like it worked, and also because he had the interest and the ability to do it. And I refer to him and in an honored position to be my mentor. Do you have that same type of like, oh yes, here's my 3, 4, 5, 1, I don't know what the number is, of folks that you are mentoring? Or is it more like you're kind of a father figure for many, a mentor figure for many in the climbing community? Like how is it super intimate and it's obvious if you're a mentor to somebody? Like, I don't know if Alex would consider you a mentor, or it's like, oh no, like that's the role that we inhabit.
Yeah, probably not in a traditional sense, but there have been conversations that we have that similarities in where we are with that. But probably actively mentoring 3 or 4 individuals that that where it's relevant in terms of climbing, but then also in being a person and being a human. So for um, young men that don't have a father or an absent father figure, to be there for them and to be, hey, happy birthday, how you doing, checking up on you. um, yeah, there's, I look at what we were able to bring to our boys, Jenny and I, the biological children of Alex that I've adopted, and we're like, yeah, I'm going to do what I can and work hard to pay for university. I'm going to help them get a small pickup truck because that's what every 28-year-old boy wants to drive, young man, right? So these things I'm helping out because they're our children, but can I help out other people outside of my family and direct circle of influence and to be there with them? So that would be, and then from people that have influenced me, there's business mentors that have given me insight to it. There's intellectual mentors. Rick Ridgway is a great, having known our family for the past 30 years and having been on expeditions with Alex and seen how our family has changed in this unique space that Jenny and I have. He's always been a great mentor in that sense. And also at a very important point in our Jenny and I and building and developing our relationship, to affirm that we're doing the right thing, and that support from close friends and family was really gave us the strength to embark on the family that we've created.
Can you take a moment and bring people into just how complicated that relationship was, almost right from the get-go? Like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. For me, from a distance, it looks like it probably started off incredibly complicated. But I would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah. So 1999, kind of May 1st, I was on Everest, discovered the preserved and frozen body of George Mallory. And the first email note I get from anyone in my circle is from Alex Lowe, who had been my dedicated climbing partner over a period of 9 years and a bunch of expeditions and doing fun things. And then 5 months later, we were on an expedition to Shishapangma, and an
Where is that?
avalanche.
Where is that?
Shishapangma is the 14th highest peak in the world. It's entirely within Tibet, and it's just over the border from Nepal. So it's one of the 8,000-meter peaks. And we had a very bold and goal of trying to ski the south face of it, which was pretty, this big stakes type of expedition, filmed by ABC TV and all the trappings of a commercial professional climbing expedition. And then it was there on the 5th of October that Alex and David Bridges were swept away in an avalanche and lost their lives. And so on my end, it was their life just went from one gear to another, and it was a very sudden point there. But within that Jenny and I found happiness with each other in the process of the grief that we were both experiencing. And on my end, the immediacy and the intensity, the violence of an avalanche, and then walking away from it with injury, and then the weight of survivor's guilt afterwards. Like, I was 36. Alex was a couple years older than I am, but he was like, he had it together. He had the family, and that was, and so that, how did that reflect in onto me? So our relationship is unique. And our eldest son, Max, recently created a film titled Torn, which is through National Geographic documentary films and is available at Disney Plus. And it has a very in-depth look at our family and our family dynamic as told by one of us.
And so, just to round out the story, Jenny's relationship with Alex is the part that makes it complicated. And so can you just talk about survivor guilt, the relationship between Jenny and Alex, and then how you and Jenny became romantic? Like how did, just walk through that contextually for just a moment, because I've got about 3 questions I want to ask.
So Alex, at the time in the late 90s, was a professional climber, and that meant being on expedition, traveling to remote mountains, trying these adventurous climbs, coming back with a story that is then shared. And at the same time, Alex and Jenny had 3 children, Max, Sam, and Isaac. And always within what we do, there's the awareness that something could go wrong, an accident or a fatality. And we accept that in return for the intrinsic reward that we get from being outdoors and sharing that adventure, and the professional rewards that we get it. But we have to like make peace with that value proposition that you could perish in the mountains. Certainly when we were out climbing, it wasn't something that we would dwell on and be like, oh, this or that, or we knew it was there and had it help out as sort of being a decision-making prism. Like, we have to be here for other people, and particularly if you're a parent, which was with Alex. So yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of parents that are climbers out there, but there are a lot of the sort of that cutting edge when you want to push it as hard as you can. It's pretty much single men and women that are they don't have the extra responsibility of a larger family or along those lines. So, but that was leading up to Jenny and I getting together, and then we got together after the avalanche in 1999, and just being there and it for each other, and it was falling in love with the boys as much as with Jenny. And for them, though Sam was 7 years old, and that age where your best friend is like the biggest currency in the world. Like, come back and on the playground, so-and-so said they're my best friend. And they're like, that's huge. And they're like, he was your best friend. And so that connection that the children had there. And then also realizing that they, with love and attention and doing things, that the weight of loss wouldn't be as immediate for the children. So we enthusiastically set out on being in love and cherishing our love with each other, Jenny and I, and being there for the children, and then doing things, whether it's musicals at school or science projects or taking them to their soccer practice, or just being there as a parent, and kind of really filling time that could go astray with purpose. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so much embedded in here, which is deep relationships, and spoken or unspoken, from Alex to you, and about like, hey, make sure if I never come back, or if I don't come back, that you take care of, like keep an eye out for the family. And you were close with the family. And so then there was this natural kind of grieving, healing, care, love, attention that moved into you basically building a family with the family that he was building as well, which is super complicated. Like I honestly, maybe this is more common, like you've seen something like this before, but your way of living is remarkable to me. And when I say you, I don't necessarily mean you right now. I mean the adventure-based life approach from a professional standpoint. It's fascinating because of the truth, the purity, the full commitment, the things that you mentioned, that you could perish on the mountain at any time. And so you got to have some stuff in order, or some stuff that is completely chaotic and there's a recklessness. And you and I both know that those folks don't last very long. Either they realize that they're not made for it, or they make a catastrophic mistake. And My point here is that the intimacy of relationships is heightened when you work in environments of consequence. And so, like, there's a depth that you hold that other people might not understand because of the frequency that you face high consequence. Not necessarily risk, but high consequence. And the ultimate consequence is that physical life is no longer. So was there a sense of responsibility at any level for you to take care of Ginny and the kids?
There wasn't a spoken or written thing that,
Mm-hmm.
like, here we were a third night in some horrendous bivouac and it's stormy and it's like, God, if I ever make it out of here alive, take care of my family. And it's something out of a sailor movie, or it wasn't
Right.
even,
Yeah. Right.
it wasn't a line out of it wasn't scripted or anything like that, but rather it was just knowing that you're there for your partner. And as you mentioned, being in situations of consequence is really, that changes how humans interact with each other. And that's one of the reasons that working with at-risk youth, taking them climbing, all of a sudden they're like, oh, if you don't believe me, I could hurt my ankle. And you get 3 body lengths above the ground. And our body, we're scared. And you have to train yourself to not be scared. But it's the same way if I paddle out to a wave that I know is, or where I shouldn't be there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get swirled in the water and my sand in my eyelids. And I come back and I'm like, wow. And I get that sense of fear there. And so because you have those moments with people, you're that much, you literally have their back. So you're like, okay, because you got me through this pinch when we ran out of food or we had to dig a tent platform. When you're back at home, you're like, okay, let's have dinner or let's do something that you have a heightened relationship with that person.
This is one of the reasons that I had to leave. I didn't share this with you, but we have a similar approach to man-made rules, and I did not fit in as a young kid with traditional stick and ball sport because it was these man-made rules and these adults screaming at me. I was like, "What are we doing?"
Yeah.
And so that's what attracted
Yeah.
me to Mother Nature as a teacher because it was swift, it was really consistent, and like you had to be on your game, like you really had to be fully present. And so I was deeply attracted there, uh, maybe for some of the same reasons that you are, but you've tripled down on it, and I didn't have that ability to do that. I actually chose, in some respects, the safer, much safer route was traditional education. And my traditional education became like this rich fascination. And so I was compelled to keep following the science of being at home with yourself in stressful environments. I had to understand it better because I didn't understand it as a kid. I couldn't live it. And so I would love if you could, this is not a fair question, but what I'm fascinated by is I know you know things. You have been all across the planet. You spent much of your life in consequential environments, rugged, hostile, collaboration required and relationship required to get through it, on top of all the technical skills. I would love if you could somehow maybe do 2 things. Tell a story to bring some of the nuances of what I just said to life, but to leave us with, if we knew what you knew, how would we do our life? How would presidents run countries? How would CEOs run organizations? How would teachers run classrooms? How would parents run their family? So maybe there's a long-winded way of me saying, bring me into a moment or a time in your life where shit was real. and from that experience, if we could hydrate leaders across the world, that they would understand what you understood, that we would be living better.
Yeah. The most relevant takeaway from a life of consequence is that we're in this together. So the lesson that we're there for others is probably the most salient bit of knowledge that a life in the mountains has given me. And that if you're there for others, that person will be there for you. And that's how you have success. And that helping others is, in and of itself, a source of well-being and happiness. And so if I can help out a young climber and with technique, or with, here's an ice tool, or how can I, or open a door, make an introduction, something like that, there's well-being in that. And to a sense that if we look at the people that are destitute, living without a home, that are at the margin of society, they might not necessarily have that opportunity to help other people. They're being helped, but for them to help someone else. And so one often sees these people that are, life is difficult. They're caring for an animal or a pet. And that, when I see that, I'm like, that's the first step of human emotion, that they can then help out. And so rather than being like, oh, this person's a burden to society and they slip between the cracks, mental health isn't there, and they have a dog and all that, I'm like, yeah, they're trying, and they're trying to do with that. But I guess that being in these situations with consequence, you have to 100% trust the person you're with, is changes how you look at things. And seeing that with, we always joke about, oh, it'd be great if we could get the world leaders to go on a camp out. Obviously there's the classic example of John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt having a cup of coffee over a campfire in the creation of national parks. And what can we do now in the 21st century, that in the 22nd century, going forward in the next 100 years, what are those conversations going to be? That we need to address bigger questions in preserving some land for aesthetic joy and beauty. But
wait, is that how it happened? John
Muir,
yeah,
they were
and Roosevelt
and Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, they camped out in Yosemite.
And were they friends and they went on a camp, or they just happened to be friends at a similar campsite?
No, they were friends. And it was, whether it was arranged or staged, it was, but yeah, it was, at the time, Yosemite was a state park, and it was run by the Mariposa Battalion, chasing the Miwok Indians out of there, and white imperialism there at its finest. And so recognizing that, but the first national park, Yellowstone, now celebrated 150 years, and what that concept was and how it worked out. But getting people that, so when you had Roosevelt and Muir's, both leaders in their own right, and to sit back and to wax poetic about the benefits of being outdoors, then good things came from that. And that conversation might not have taken place in the Oval Office. There's something about standing around a campfire and stirring the coals and waiting for the soup to be ready that it sort of strips away the pretense that society and buildings and status and the accoutrements that we insulate ourselves and project ourselves with, and all that's gone. You're like, you and I mean, we have a great conversation right now because I can see you. It's through a Zoom, but imagine the conversation after a long day of adventuring and warming our hands by the coals and looking at the stars and things like that. So
it's the silence that is so powerful.
Yeah. And that, and it's for people that cherish that and they see the benefit of it. It's a wonderful way. And we see those empirical studies that are done on nature and how it calms the mind, and a variety of different ways that we can look at that. And so hopefully that to get people into that same opportunity.
Okay, I want to take a quick little break here to talk about a new partner, Carol. Carol Bike offers the shortest, most effective cardio workout I've ever done. It's amazing. It's the only AI-powered exercise bike that's scientifically proven to give you the benefits of a 45-minute run in as little as 5 minutes. Carol saves you time for the things that matter most. Okay, so how's it work? The science behind Carol is based on REHIT, reduced exertion high intensity interval training. So it's new. It's improved from HIIT training, which you've heard of, high intensity interval training. Developed with leading exercise researchers looking for the shortest, most effective workout possible, Carol is by far the best way to get the full benefits of REHIT outside of a lab setting. I love my Carol bike. I use it in 2 ways. After I do my movement work, strength and training or mobility or something like that. And then also when I'm on the run and my schedule just gets fully jammed up, there's literally no reason I can't find an excuse to get on the bike for 8 minutes. So developed with scientists, backed by research, and trusted by more than 16,000 riders, you can experience Carol for yourself with free delivery and a 100-day trial. If you don't love it, return it. No questions asked. Visit carolbike.com and use the code FindingMastery to get your free lifetime Carol membership, normally charged at $12 a month. This is legit. I want to encourage you to go check it out. I love it. carolbike.com and then use the code FindingMastery to get your free lifetime Carol membership. Again, that's normally $12 a month. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. And Finding Mastery is brought to you by Wealthfront. If you regularly listen to this podcast, you know that I am not a supporter of shortcuts and hacks and tricks and tips. They just don't work. Progress and growth take time. And that's why I love what Wealthfront is doing. Wealthfront takes a long-term approach to investing with automated investing portfolios. Wealthfront's automated training optimizes your portfolio based on your risk settings, helping you reach your financial goals without lifting a finger. They also get you automatic tax breaks that you can boost your returns with. Even when the market dips, it's kind of like a bonus coupon that you can redeem at tax time. You can go with Wealthfront's expert-built portfolios, including a socially responsible option that's designed around sustainability, diversity, and equity, or you can build your own portfolio. Wealthfront is trusted with over $27 billion in assets, helping nearly 500,000 people build their wealth. And Investopedia just named them their best robo-advisor for 2022. It's pretty amazing, considering the year isn't even halfway through yet. So to start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed for free for life, go to wealthfront.com/finding mastery. So you spell it Wealthfront, WEALTH, front, FRONT, wealthfront.com/finding mastery to start building your wealth. Again, wealthfront.com/finding mastery to get started today. And with that, let's get right back into our conversation. Okay, so the mountain creates a forcing function to be there for others. And you were attracted to go to the mountain for what reasons? Like, what was the calling to go to the mountain? And the lesson is, like we just talked about, the forcing function, be there for other people. And that's the hand down or the baton pass to others, hopefully, that you're ringing the bell saying, hey, listen, fundamentally organize your life to be there for other people, to have their back. And if we could all do that, boy, this life that we're experiencing now would be much richer. And then but what was the calling to go to the mountain for you?
We were introduced to the High Sierra in the central Sierra Nevada between Highway 120 and Highway 108. So we'd go from Sonora Pass to Tioga Pass back and forth, depending on the year, and spend 2 weeks with mules and camping and just being outdoors. And that was always but I look at my 2 sisters and my brother, and we're all close to each other as anyone could ever be. But why did I end up where I was? And so I kind of think like my factory setting was like, go climbing. I was just born with that DNA chain. So I'm like, I'm damned. If I don't follow it, it's going to be a miserable life. If I do follow it, maybe good things could happen from that. But just being in the mountains at age 10 and looking up at the peaks and going up to the scrambling peaks with the family and coming back and making a campfire and floating pieces of wood down the small rivulet of water coming off the snowbank. Little creative things like that for children where I was like, this is where I'm happiest. And that moment came probably about age 14 as we were finishing up one of our summer pack trips. And it'd been a long time out, but it was one of those mornings where you wake up and while the birds are singing, the sun is shining, the pack packs itself, it weighs less than what it does. And we were hiking out the trail, and there was this moment that is still with me to this point where I was like, this is where I'm happiest, is being in nature and doing this. So whatever I do in life, this is the emotion where I want to be, spending time walking in nature. It doesn't necessarily go into the technical climbing that followed as a result of it, but rather that fundamental being in nature is where I'm happiest. And then using that as a decision prism to the work that I did choose was like, well, if I can get out more often, then I'm succeeding.
Okay, you could have become a park ranger. You could have done a lot of things, but so it's being in nature. You had this watershed moment of enlightenment when you're 14, and it's like be outside, be in nature, be connected. I'm using some of my own language there, and then but there's an element of consequence and adventure that is subtext to it, and I'm wondering how you answer to the traditional knock, which is like, okay, I get it, I hear what you're saying. But you're really selfish. You go away for 2 months, 3 months at a time, maybe longer on expeditions. You leave your family, your kids, not necessarily you, but maybe someone else, and you're putting your life at stake for your reward. And they're at home a mess because dad might not come back. Like, come on. There's a selfishness to what you're doing. And you want to romanticize like being outside and having these enlightened experiences, but really you're just chasing something else and not attending to the relationships at home.
Yeah, this is not the first time I've heard that. It's something that I wrestle with a lot. And so
Well,
that was
before you go into a Conrad, you know
yeah.
how I know that? I know that. Okay. So I wrestle with that in my own life. And so, by the way, you don't have to be an adventure athlete to wrestle with the selfish nature of pursuing goals and pursuing a lifestyle. You call it workaholism. There's lots of ways that we don't attend. And so, but I would love to hear your take response to that narrative.
Yes. Obviously, high altitude climbing is specifically a very dangerous pursuit. Going to the greater ranges and avalanche, loss of life is far more dangerous than quotidian life day to day. We get that. And then layering up to it, we're doing it by our own volition. We're going out, we're choosing hardship and the suffering and cold and lack of food for the thrill of doing it, the intrinsic reward we get of doing it. And yes, it is completely selfish, is completely ego driven. We want to be the biggest. You notice that the strength of my ego at a young climber in the 20s and 30s was different than what it is today. And so recognizing that as a driving force when I was young was an understanding to be like, I was the first person to climb that, and I did it in such a style that everyone else like have to come back and climb it in that same style, or be really bold. Or I mean, it's sort of this posturing that takes place within the climbing community is very much tied in with ego and gatekeeping and what we do with it. So when people take on risk, we look at the police person or we look at the fire person, that they have, they're doing it on behalf of other people. And so when their life is cut short or compromised, they then become heroes because they were protecting us from an evil entity, whether it's another nation or a criminal or medicine. We look at the people that are on the forefront of medicine. So they have a lot of risk, and so they then society rewards them in sort of like a as a person. But when you take it on by your own volition for something as frivolous as standing on top of a nondescript patch of snow at great risk to your family, then yes, it is selfish. And we have to kind of make peace with that and understand it. And the way in which that I look at it is we are on this planet to cover our basic needs of food, shelter, clothing. And then once we have attended to those, or we don't let those three things become who we are, that we then move on towards what we want to do in life, our self-actualization. And on my end, it happened to be climbing mountains. And so I'm certain that my mother would probably, well, and you were playing the recorder at elementary school, and why didn't you become a classical musician? Why did you have to go out and do this? Because of the risk associated with it. And so, but for whatever someone's goal in life, when they find that, whether it's surfing, poetry, theology, science, whatever you find, and then you work towards mastering that, then there is a higher calling to it. With the caveat that with what I do, if I had to die in the mountains, it's like a light bulb going pop, short, immediate pain. But the people that are left behind, they're the ones that have to understand a non-sequential passing of life. So sequential life passing is grandparents die and then parents die. And we understand that. That's kind of what we're taught in kindergarten. Like, eventually your pet bird's going to die. And so, how do you work through that? But when it's non-sequential, so when a parent loses a child, or when a spouse dies, that's when there's lasting effect within that circle of people that they communicate with. But then how do you make amends for that? How your headspace, where you're at, how things have changed. So I know, might have gotten off on a tangent there.
No. I mean, there's you addressed the selfish nature. You addressed the life of mastery. There's a greater calling. I do want to understand that a little bit. And then the non-sequential, that's a phrase that is new to me. So the non-sequential dying. Do you want your wife to die before you?
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
how about that?
We want to, every day we want with our wife and our family there to be this, and yeah, aside from both of us waking up in the morning, having had a heart attack in the middle of the night, we have to kind of think about those things.
Mm-hmm.
And where are they? And but
my wife and I talk about that. Yeah, like like, okay, one of us, it's probably not going to be a joint heart attack or something, like the light bulb poof. We definitely know that we don't want our son, to go first, non-sequential to your point. And then but so, I mean, what do you want? Do you want your wife to go first, and then she gets the poof, and then you are? I mean, it's a weird question, but I wonder if you can
it's the
wrestle with
first
that.
time I've ever been asked this. Yeah. I'm going to share it with. We're at that point where we're both at this age, and what are we going to do for the next 20 years? We're empty nesters, so 7,000 days. How are we going to make the most of them, and what's going to be meaningful to us? But it would be, probably, if she perished first, then she wouldn't have to go through the pain of me having lost my life, and I don't want her to have to go through that again. So that,
and you still are climbing.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
not the high altitude stuff, but
yeah,
I'm knowing the risk. And this, as a surfer, you're probably not paddling out to Maverick on a daily basis, but
No, but I will tell
if
you.
ever.
No, if I did not paddle at Maverick, but I will tell you a funny story. I think you'll just appreciate this. This is where I am in my life, is that I was on the North Shore. It was 3 days after the Eddy, which the Eddy only runs when it's huge, 30 plus feet. And it was 2 days after the Eddy. So we watched the Eddy. It was amazing. And the day after, it was still too big for me. 2 days after, I had a plane to catch 3 days after. So it was the second day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm pretty out of shape, but like, it's good out there. It's big, it's good. There's an imaginary line in all sport and life where it's like serious versus playful. There's this imaginary line. And I knew it was a couple steps above the imaginary line. And my wife goes, "You're not going out there, are you?" And I go, yeah, I got to do it. Conrad, I paddled out. It took me 50 minutes to get just out the back. I was a disaster. I caught one wave and it was way too big for me. And I caught one wave and I was like, I'm going in. So I didn't have the walk of shame. I got one wave and then there was no chance I was going to try to paddle back out. And so it was like a moment where I was like, it's a different game for me now. I'm not 22 and it's a totally different game. And so have you had that moment on the mountain where you're like, wait a minute, a young person should be doing this. This is not where I should be. Because I know you had a heart attack on the mountain.
Yeah, that was that moment. Yeah.
So that was a game
November
changer
16th.
for you.
Yeah, November 16th, 2016. And on the side of Lunagri, which at the time was an unclimbed peak in Nepal. And yeah, just heart attack came in. And it was, and my client partner was half my age, and he helped rescue me and keep me alive. So that was and I probably should have listened to that 5 years earlier, but I kept pushing it for 5 extra years. And so now I'm like, oh, I can climb something mellow. It doesn't have to be that cutting edge stuff. And as you realize, yeah, that you see what young athletes are capable of doing when what you have to lose equation doesn't loom as large. You and I, we grapple with that. We're like, where are we as a family person? Where are we career wise? And we have to keep all these dominoes in line to keep them from toppling over on themselves. So that our acceptable risk changes with age.
And there's a variable in there. So it's acceptable risk, which is important. And then there's another variable, which is like purpose. So let me throw this thought experiment out at you, is that if you had the chance to be the first person to go to Mars today, the suit is engineered exactly for you. There's your capabilities and skills and genetic predispositions. You're the one to go. And you had a 50% chance of coming back. Do you go?
I'd go. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And do you go for the experience, for the notch? Do you go for purpose? Like why do you go? And I love that you didn't hesitate, even after we're talking about heart attacks, death, intimate relationships. Yeah. You're like, yeah, I go.
I'm actually toying. Like, if you're to go to Mars, it's like a 7-year time commitment. Could you live in like the space bubble suit, or what would it be like? And we have these science fiction has done a great job of filling our minds up with what space should be. And thanks to Star Trek and Star Wars and Dr. No and all the films and stuff in between, the Ray Bradbury and all the science fiction writers that have given us that opportunity. But to be in that sense, the ego would be like to be the first. Like, I was in Mars. I don't know if that's the same degree of motivation that I would have. That motivation would have been stronger earlier, but a sense of discovery. And I guess at this point, like, okay, the youth on this planet, they need to be putting their minds towards how can we support the 7.4 billion people? And, how do we solve where we are with an oversubscribed planet? And so this, like, oh yeah, we don't need to settle Mars till we figure out what's going on here. We know we can turn Mars is uninhabitable, but if we don't take care of our own planet's going to be uninhabitable. So there's that.
Yeah, but I love your non-hesitation. You're like, oh yeah, I go. It's so good. Okay, how often do you think about death? Because you're more practiced at it from the non-sequential standpoint, certainly, than 99.9% of the population. You're very practiced. But how often do you think about death? I really
Ooh,
don't know. You might say, I don't
yeah,
think about it. Like I'm
yeah.
thinking about life.
No, I think about death on. Um, it's it it's just here in where I am, and knowing that um, the cost that the life I've chosen to lead that it's had. There's yeah, I think of Alex Lowe. Never got to see his children grow up. I mean, that's a loss for him on that. I think of my other friends with that, but it's it's not like a gruesome, like, oh, it's scary. So perhaps spool this back just a second. I don't go to violent movies. I just can't. Like, if it's a movie that's got cops and robbers and guns and all that stuff, I'm like, I just can't do it. I don't watch them. It's not for me. And we think back 300 years, and life was far more difficult for all humans on this planet. Childbirth was major consequence. There's infant mortality. I mean, you get through all these gauntlets of life, and you get to be an old person at age 40. And so, things were vastly different in that sense. And so, having experienced death in the vicinity through climbing accidents, and specifically the accident with Alex Lowe and David Bridges, and then coming back 16 years later and pulling their bodies out of the glacier and cremating them, it's like, yeah, I understand death and mortality, but not in a trivialized, sensational way that is used as entertainment, but rather more like it's something that we're all going to face, but we have to treat it with respect.
And your idea of after we physically die, what happens?
We get recycled. So we're carbon on this 4.5 billion year old planet, and and so the recycler is a gender fluid identity. It doesn't necessarily be a god or anything like that, but we look at a deer that didn't make it through the winter, and you see the corpse of that deer disintegrating and then becoming eventually, even the bones dissolve back into the earth. And so I think that in that sense, this carbon's it's been floating around this planet for 4.5 billion years. It inhabited this body. I have a soul and a mind that brought it to where I am.
Do you have a spiritual framework, like the spirit and the mind piece?
Yeah, spirit. So this is so the foundation of it is that I am an atheist. So I look at all the world's religions from a formative standpoint, where one, there was to explain the cosmos. So why is the sun there? Why are there clouds? Why is the world such? And why volcanoes? And so we didn't have science to understand it. And the other part is the social contract, which the underlying foundation of that is do unto others as you do unto them. And so that reciprocal, like, goodwill is the foundation of all the world's religions. And I'm not an expert on comparative religions or anything like that, but so I'm polycultural aware, but try not to appropriate different religions or anything like that, but just seeing the beauty in them and respecting them and giving them joy and space and respect and happiness. So I don't want to be antagonistic towards any other person's belief in the same way that my beliefs might not be anywhere in there. But if there was one unifying force in all this, and you can see this is my travel spoon, but for all of you that are listening in, I'm dropping the spoon and it just went through the screen. That is gravity. And we are born and we struggle with gravity. We learn to walk or crawl and walk and play. And then if you're really a high disciple of gravity, you really challenge it. So Alex Honnold climbing a cap without a rope. I mean, he's paid his dues worshiping gravity, and then at the end of the day, we all cease to exist, and we go back to the carbon being reintegrated into the planet. And in what manner does it sort of appear the next time?
And then how do you, it's a very brave statement, I find, to say I'm an atheist. And the reason I say brave and, with some courage in there, because I find within myself, so I was spoon-fed Christian, Catholic. And then I happened to go to graduate school or undergraduate school to a Jesuit school. And the Jesuits are an order in the Catholic school that are or Catholic religion that are incredibly progressive. And they basically beat religion out of me. Like, why do you think we should eat fish on Fridays? What is that about? When was the year that was designed as a practice, Mike? And who owned the fishing wharfs at that time? And so it really gets you thinking, like, wait a minute, there's other things in here that to consider. And so I say that, I'm in dangerous territory of offending many people, but this is my unique experience, is that it got me to second guess all of the rules that religion installed in many respects. And the reason I say there's a courage and a bravery to say I'm an atheist, because when I hear atheist, I go, oh, okay, so there's no God. Okay, I don't believe in God. And what happens after life, if there's no God, is that we just die. And there's a reincarnation of carbon. And I don't know if I'll come back as another human, but I'm declaring with great finality that I'm not going to heaven to meet Alex and my other loved ones that have passed. I'm just going to be recycled. And so there's the courage, bravery in that is that this physical form is done at the age our brain and our heart give out. And after that, so it's not you're not buying the social contract for do good now because later there's a heaven and you'll be rewarded later. You're saying, no, do good now because that in and of itself is the reward. It's the means
And
to
we
live
live
well.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where I'm at was a result of my mother. So she was born in 1933, and her father was a switched train tracks, and I mean they weren't nobility in East Germany. They were just people of the land. And so she was born in 1933, and so you can imagine at age 13 she experiences the firebombing of Dresden. And that's about from here to Belgrade, next town over in our valley here in Montana, Bozeman to Belgrade, a distance away. So you can imagine a 13-year-old child that's peals of laughter playing Foursquare at elementary school, but none of that was there. And so she was like, oh, the trappings of religion, being she was Protestant. My father was born Catholic, then switched to becoming a Unitarian when we were kids and doing good and mission-based work as a family. And then after I started traveling to the Himalayas, coming back with Eastern Buddhist philosophy, he then became a Buddhist. And I'm not a Buddhist, but I respect, understand the philosophy in a good way. But he went and became part of a temple and practiced that, which was and my mother was like, no, we're just going to die and become worm food with her heavy German accent, worm food. So it's like individuals were moral, but then society-wise, we become that construct kind of comes apart. Like, why is that? As an individual, we're great people and we're doing good things, but then society-wise, what's that tipping point to then the atrocities that humans have done unto other humans? Why do they happen? And is religion complicit in that? And the amount of loss of life because of belief that is, yeah, I do slideshows and I'm in the public sphere. People are like, they come up and like, hey, you've got energy, you have this charisma, the Lord is speaking to you. And then I have this conversation. I'm like, well, I believe in gravity and molecules and dirt. There's like this, and the individual is like, hey, Jesus is talking to you. You need to open up and let him into your life. And I'm like, well, I'll try, but anyways, we got off the tangent here.
No, I think you're hinting at some. No. I think you're. So let me just give context. Is that part of the understanding of mastery, and you are somebody that has a deep mastery of your craft, and certainly mastery of your inner life. And so, what are the frameworks that you use? What are the practices that you develop, which we haven't talked about any practices yet, but what are the frameworks? This is all about framework so far, which is, yeah, when we die, we get recycled. So that would set up the next question. Well, how do I want to live? And you're saying, well, I want to live outside. I want to live with nature. I want to live in environments that are stimulating. And I want to live where I have other people's backs. And I know I'm part of a community where they have my back. And I'm really seeing other people. And the time I have with them, I want to see them and I want to be seen. And I do kind of like the consequential nature of things because it's a forcing function for things to be true and pure. And I think you also hinted in there. Look, I don't know, but like there's a lot of suffering and grief. I'm not sure if there's a omnipotent, omniscient being, an all-loving, all-caring, all-knowing being, that suffering would be part of the process here. But I kind of extrapolated that. You didn't say that. But I paused there. What do you think?
But Jimmy says that all the time. He's like, oh, you like to suffer, right?
Yeah, I saw that in one of the movies.
You're gonna run out of food.
Yeah, it was one of the movies where he's like, why do you like suffering so much? So okay, all that being said, let's just shift gears just a little bit here, which is what are some practices, that are important for you to be aware, important for you to have a dynamic, healthy, honest relationship with yourself? And the cheap question is like, how do you develop confidence, or how do you develop that sense of calm in your life? But like, what are the practices that you have to be aware and to have a relationship with yourself and others that is true?
Probably acceptance of the other person's circumstance and where they are. So one, to see each person as a friend that I hadn't seen for a long time, like, oh yeah, it's so good to see you. This is great. And so there was a connection that you and I had in that sense, that welcoming that person to be in there. And then understanding that what they have gone through, there's no, we just don't know where that is. And as an example, there's a fellow within our community that has a neurodegenerative challenge. And so the way he walks appears that from someone from the outside that he's inebriated. And it was, I've seen the fellow, I've never said hello to him, but I know him and I recognize him within my community. And it was like, we're driving down and a friend and acquaintance was like, oh, looks like he just went for a bender. He's still, it's 6 a.m. We're on our way to go climbing and it looks like he's stumbling down the street. I'm like, no, he just went to the restaurant. He has this takeout thing of food and we have no idea. And so that, I don't want it to be seen as being naive and getting taken advantage of, because people that are from the wrong place are going to take that. But for someone that is in an environment that we're not familiar with and what they're doing with it, we have no idea where they can be. So to not judge people and to have other people not judge us as individuals. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you practice that. You don't have a formal practice of non-judgmental, like a meditation practice, you practice it in your waking moments when you recognize
Yeah.
that you could be judging. You're like, wait a minute, hold on, I don't know their story. Let me not judge.
Yeah. And at times it's a test of patience. And so, yeah, when you're people like they're driving and there's glass between you and the vehicle, and you're in these different worlds, different lanes, and then someone's like yelling at you, or their vehicle is um, festooned with messaging that doesn't necessarily appeal to who you are, but you're like, okay, I'm not gonna flip that person off. I'm not gonna make a judgment based on the sticker that they've put on the back of their car. I'm just gonna wish them a good day, and not to be like, hey, that's, and obviously there's the signaling that we do as people is, I mean, it's everything from microaggressions to full out in your face taunting. And so we have to be mindful of that.
How do you are somebody who has pushed right up against the edges of physical boundaries, psychological barriers that have been created from a global perspective, a community perspective, and sometimes in your own mind, I'm sure. So you push right up against the edges. And then how do you work with the critique and the judgment that other people make of you? Because I'm sure many people thought that like your second trip up Meru, and I want to encourage everyone that's listening to go check out that documentary and check out Torn as well. Um, how do you deal with other people's criticalness of you?
The first step is probably not to listen to it. So I took away the direct messaging after um, putting posts up about social justice, the environment, um, election integrity, and people that don't see the same things. And it was just it was too much weight. I'm like, you don't need to yell at me. And if I've looked at it once, I don't need to look at it again. And it's just, so trying to limit what um, people that are out there, and they're just trying to get your goat, so to say, and antagonize someone with that. But then probably coming back to being centered with Jennifer and I. So we're like, we have our family. Alex lost his life. We created a household for the children and encouraged them to be students. They've gone on, they finished university, and they're good people. And that, for us, that is what we set out to do. And if someone's going to toss a sugar tip dart because they see things from a different moral vantage point, then that's that own person's choice, but it's not going to be me. So I'm not going to, and having endured enough of that to have a very strong distaste, that knowing that I don't want to be that person towards other people. So.
Got it. Okay. Cool framing. And then if you could sit with a master, one master, dead or alive, and if you could ask them one question, who would it be and what would be that one question?
Yeah, these are always, part of me is like, oh, it'd be great to sit with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and gain wisdom with that and on me. But then the other side of it is like, who are these really these people that have gone off the tracks, and they're obviously malicious people to begin with. And so to sit down with that person and want to be like, why did you do that? And what are your internal justifications? And what can we learn to give back to society? And so, in that sense, not that you're going to get a good answer from that, but by having those real conversations with the people that have obviously done ill to society, what can we learn from them? Sure, if I go talk to some sadhu sitting on the side of the mountain with enlightenment, then it's about me becoming a better person. But what conversation would I have with people that we could then bring that around to have a more centered conversation? And that would include, the tyrants and the evil people on this planet, to the people that had tried as best they can, and they really didn't, they weren't able to achieve their goal, and their lives were cut short. Obviously, Martin Luther King Jr. is an example of someone that would be within that. But these questions are great because they're like, these are the sort of questions we sit at in a portaledge for 3 days. And they're like, people are like, oh, what do you do when you're stuck in a portaledge for 3 days? And it's always like, oh, we tell, the same stories again and again. You'll have a food story when you're running out of food. You'd be like, oh yeah, remember the time we had portobello mushrooms as the sunset, and it was great food. And then you go into like these sort of like the hypothetical questions. Would you go to Mars? The new one is, would you die before your spouse? Those sort of, and the other one is like, if you had $1 million to give away to charity, what would you do with it?
Yeah, if you were the president of the United States, how would you, all of those things. Would you rather, is this, my 13-year-old asks me all the time, okay, Dad, ready? Would you rather lose your hand or your foot? Would you rather, not have food for, a week or whatever, so would you rather, fun games too. But okay, listen, Conrad, I could sit with you for a long time. I just want to say thank you. And
thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I really appreciate, again, the contour of your words and how you've stitched ideas together. I really appreciate the sincerity, the depth, the clarity, the honesty in how you respond, and the sense of contemplative kindness. And so, with all of the respect for what you've done on mountains and how you've mentored others in the way of living that you found to be true to you. So I just want to say thank you, and I want to encourage people to read, to watch, to listen, check out Torn, check out Meru. Is there any other book or place that you'd like to guide people toward?
Jenny's book, Forget Me Not,
Yeah,
about our life together is a worthwhile read if you want to look into more of what we're doing, but just overall being out there. But it's interesting, the last comment you had about your son at age 13, would you rather? And it seems like we're always, for children at that age, is they're trying to figure out the value set. They're like, what is a hand, or what's that worth? Or what would it be like? I can remember that same question, like, what would we do to get the Beatles back together at age 74 or something? Because they were like the coolest thing in our household. And then they were like, they split up, and it would be like those, the child, would you have vanilla or would you have strawberry ice cream or chocolate ice cream?
Yeah, right. Depending on the age. Yeah.
They're asking bigger questions, and they're trying to understand your value set, and then base on those. So, anyways, there's a great insight into that.
I never fall
for kind words.
Oh yeah, please. And I never fall for the trap with my son, or rarely. I fall for the trap. I go, oh God, great question. What do you think? and now he's on my game. He's like, Dad, I asked you for, but you try not to fall for the trap, so that he can explore his own value proposition, not be overly influenced by the adult in the room. But okay, listen, Conrad, I love what you've done. How would you title this conversation?
Oh, lessons we've learned not making it to the summit. It was always like, oh, we've made it to the summit, and it's this great moment, and here it was, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and angels flew around, and chest beating, and I made it to the summit. But the greatest lessons we have in life are not making it. And so, to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, there are two tragedies in life: getting what you want and not getting what you want. And finding that middle path where you get what you want some of the times, but then other times you're like realizing that's not exactly what it is, because on either extreme you'll have emotional dissonance. So when you can be at peace with right there in the middle, then you're going the right direction. Yeah.
I love it. You're a legend.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Well,
you.
thank you, Michael. And
Yeah,
thank you,
and I
listeners out there. So I really appreciate it. So
oh, it's so good. And I'm sure you'll see Jimmy before I do. I don't know that for sure, but most likely. So give him a big hug for me.
will do. All
Okay.
the best.
All the best. Take care. Thank you.